Alright, I'm back. This is part 2 of the Brunswick Ultona reproducer rebuild. There's the parts removed from part 1 of the video. So here's part 2, working on the lateral side. And this reproducer uses a system that's common on a lot of reproducers of this era. The needle bar here pivots on cup and cone bearings, like the bearings on a balance wheel of an alarm clock, or like the mandrel on an Edison A or B style phonograph, where there's a cup and a point. The difference in this, though, from a watch or a mandrel is that if there's any play in this bearing system at all, it's going to be audible as a buzz. So this has to be set up just a little bit on what would be considered the tight side compared to most of how these are set up. And it's really fairly simple how these work. There's a lock nut here. I do not like the autofocus on this because there is none. There's a lock nut here, and then this screw right here is the actual threaded piece itself that's pointed on the end. And that's how you make these adjustments. So in order to take this side apart, we've got to undo 4 screws around the perimeter of the bezel again, and take this apart and take the stylus bar out. Now, the thing I like to do is, assuming that it was centered to begin with initially, is only take one side out to get the stylus bar out, and don't mess with both sides. As you can see, this stylus bar has a few bends in it, and you can very clearly see that it is not centered between the two bosses here. So it really doesn't matter which side we take out, but I would like to make an attempt to center it a little bit, even if that means bending this a little bit, because the diaphragm needs to be centered also. As you recall from part 1, the diaphragm on the Edison side was not centered, it was touching the shell. And the same thing needs to happen here. This needs to be centered. And I believe, it's kind of hard to remember what I did exactly on this 25 years ago, but I believe what I did on this was I put the bottom gasket in first, laid the diaphragm down, and then put all this together, and then used this to center the diaphragm left to right in the reproducer body. You can't very well center it up and down. That's kind of fixed by the length of this, although if you look at the way this is made, you can bend this foot a little bit to center it up and down, but centering it side to side, you have quite a bit of adjustment. And of course, this is a lot to be talking about during this part of the process, because this is the disassembly stage. But my point is there's no point in reinventing the wheel unless you absolutely have to, and this is one of those cases where I'd kind of like to, because I'm sometimes a bit of a perfectionist. So I'm going to use a pair of pliers here and carefully try to back off this lock nut, which you just saw me do. The lock nut is now backed off, and using a screwdriver of suitable size, I'm just going to go ahead and remove this entirely so that some of the viewers can see what this is. So there's the actual point that the stylus bar pivots on, and you can see how this is made. It's made a lot like the balance on a watch. or alarm clock. So we'll set that aside. Now this is loose and could very easily come off. I'm going to go ahead and remove the other side now. This is normally a lot easier to do when there's not a camera in your line of sight between your hands. Okay, there's the other side. Now the needle bar is attached only by the center of the diaphragm. And I've got a roll of cloth electrical tape here to set the reproducer on because it's got this indexing pin at the back I don't want to break off. So this will allow me to put some downward pressure on this thing and get the bezel screws off. There's one. Two. This one looks like it's a little proud of the surface. Maybe it's gotten loose. Not liking this. Three. And four. Okay. Now, this kind of has to happen in concert because of the way this is made. Taking the bezel off, and I'll have to do the same thing I did on the other reproducer side. Just gently. And you saw these are new gaskets, guys. Look at that. It actually crumbled. Isn't that amazing? Okay. Now at this point we could gently take and try to get the diaphragm loosened up a little bit, because you can see the bezel is still trapped by the stylus bar. Or we can use a little screw down in there that holds the stylus bar to the diaphragm. We just go ahead and loosen that off and remove it. And get the stylus bar out of the way. And then get the bezel out of the way. And then there's the screw with the shellac impregnated paper washer. Set that with the other pieces. Now, at this point, we need to remove the gasket, which I'm not gonna lie, it's wow. It's flexible in places, but for the most part, it's totally perished. Okay, now we got to get the diaphragm out, and if you look, it appears I did a pretty decent job of centering this side. I'm going to be very careful, not trying to really pry against the diaphragm. So I want it to come out. Use the butt end of a screwdriver that'll fit down through the hole into the other side to, or something that'll fit to the other side. And try to very gently push on the diaphragm from the other side. And if it still won't come off, if it's absolutely glued on by the gasket, what I can do is I can get some solvent and put in there, but that might affect this original paint there too. So I'm probably just going to have to very gently work it until it fatigues and comes apart. So let's stop the video there, and I'll come back with part 3 after I have the diaphragm out.